Well, Merry Christmas, and today I want to bring to your attention the Star of Bethlehem. I have always believed it was a comet, but as I researched a little bit into this, I came across Dr. Larson, and the Holy Spirit led me to him. I had found on the tilma of Guadalupe that Jupiter, one of the last events on the tilma of Guadalupe in the summer constellations, is the scales. And to understand what the scales represent, you have to understand that the black horse rider, the Antichrist Famat of Islam, holds the scales in his hands. I have discovered that the black horse rider represents the Antichrist, and the red horse rider represents the false prophet with the sword. But on the tomb of Guadalupe, their scales are there, and the scales is the last event. It is the last event before Christ returns. And that will be the 3 days of darkness when the planets fall out of alignment. Jupiter is over the scales. How amazing, right? And so this means that Jupiter is referring to the 3 days of darkness, the final event, because it's over the scales of justice. Now, before we start about the 3 days of darkness, I want to show you an important thing here. You can see there at the top, the summer constellations with the green, with the crescent and the star, like I showed in my previous video, that represents, actually that represents the name Lucifer. He is a crescent and star. And Islam is that very symbol. And at the top you have the 3 Antichrists of Islam. You have the Antipope as a Mohammedan, St. Hildegard warns us, and he will be, as Jezebel was, he will be from Lebanon. You have the 12th Imam from Iran, and then you have Isa, who will be Famat, who is Syrian Jewish, and he will be the Isa of Islam, the false Jesus. In the center, in the middle, in the interior mantle, we have Leo, the lion, which is for Jesus, the one who came 2,000 years ago, and we have Virgo, who represents Mary, the Mother of God. And then we also have the fleur-de-lis, which is the French symbol, because World War III will be between the French great monarch and Iran of Islam. So this World War III comes before the rise of the Antichrist, you see there at the top. So the warning and World War III with Iran come before the year 2027. And then there's about 30 or so years between the warning and the war with Iran and the coming of Antichrist in 2066. There's the 3 Antichrists of Islam who will appear in the summer of 2066. Now, in the summer constellations is the scales, which is called Libra. Libra is for the scales of justice, and the black horse rider holds the scales, which is the Antichrist. Jupiter, as you see there to the left, appeared over the scales on the tilma of Guadalupe. And I'm going to show you exactly where on the scales, where the scales appeared on the tilma, which is right by the 3 Antichrists, because the 3 days of darkness is the last event. And it will be a planetary phenomenon, because Jupiter will fall out of alignment. Jupiter is the vacuum cleaner of the planets. And it was discovered near the Antichrist, the 3 Antichrists of Islam. It will be the 3 days of darkness. So again, Libra represents the scales, a constellation on the tomb of Guadalupe. Jupiter, the planet, appeared over it. And amazingly, this represents the 3 days of darkness, the phenomenon which comes at the very end, the very last event. It will be God's justice. You can see there the planet Jupiter right over the scales, the constellation that is actually on the tomb of Guadalupe. And you see the 3 Islamic Antichrists around the scales, because that's how God, Jesus, when he returns, he's going to destroy the Antichrist. The 3 days of darkness is part of that destruction of the 3 Antichrists. And after the 3 days of darkness comes the New Jerusalem and the millennium. But you can't have the millennium and you can't have the New Jerusalem unless you go through the trial of the Antichrist of Islam. Remember in the Bible, if you read about in Revelation, those that opposed the mark of the Antichrist, he brought them back to life, and they were part of that 1,000 years of the millennium. That's called the first resurrection. Read about it in the Bible. There's going to be no rapture, and there's going to be no millennium without the trial of the Antichrist. You can't have, enjoy 1,000 years of peace if you don't go through the trial. You can't have your crown if you don't go through suffering. So Jupiter is there. It represents the 3 days of darkness. It's over the scales of Libra, which represent the 3 days of darkness and the final chastisement from God. Jesus will come back after these 3 days of darkness, and there will be the 1,000 years of peace. And all the enemies of religion will be gone. So I want to bring to your attention again that Jupiter was the planet that Dr. Larson I found on the internet. He proved that the planet that caused the Star of Bethlehem, that they talk about in the Bible, in the book of the Gospel of St. Matthew, that the wise men followed from to Jerusalem when they approached Herod, and when they went from Jerusalem to Bethlehem, they followed that star, and it was caused by Jupiter. And Jupiter is here again over the scales because it represents Jesus' second coming. That's why it's on the tilma of Guadalupe. His first coming, it happened the same way. Jupiter appeared at his first coming. It's the king planet. It's also the planet that is the vacuum cleaner for asteroids and for the comets that protects our Earth. But in this particular punishment, this is the final one on the scales, because remember, the black horse rider is the Antichrist, and the Antichrist and the apostasy have to come, according to St. Paul, in order for Jesus to return. So Jesus' second coming will involve the planet Jupiter again, as it did in his first coming. And I'm going to show you a video clip here from Dr. Larson that shows you how this planet was part, and also imagery from the tilma of Guadalupe that prove that this tilma is about his second coming, and how the planet Jupiter was a part of Jesus' first coming, as much as it will be a part of his second coming when he comes as a just king. So here's Dr. Larson. He's an amazing man. He's an attorney. He did a lot of study on the planets and how they relate to what happened in Bethlehem. And he found that Jupiter was the planet that was responsible for that star that the wise men saw on Christmas Day. Let's listen to Dr. Larson. It's fascinating what he found. Please listen to this part. It's so amazing.
Next, I want to ask you a question. 12 Jewish tribes. One produces Messiah. Which one? Anybody know? You're right. Say it louder. It's Judah. That's right. What's the animal symbol for the tribe of Judah? That's correct. Okay, good. Let me take you to the first book of the Bible. Look at Genesis 49 for a prediction of the coming Messiah. We read, "You're a lion's cub, O Judah. You return from the prey, my son. Like a lion, he crouches and lies down. Like a lioness, who dares rouse him? The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he comes to whom the scepter belongs, and the obedience of the nations is his." I need a prop. I'm going to use this for a prop. Y'all know what a scepter is? The thing that kings hold to show that they're kings, right? I want you to remember this scepter is going to show up again. Okay? So this is a prediction of Messiah coming in his role as King of Kings. Well, that association with the Lion of Judah, that helps us. Let's go back to the sky. If we look at the sky and turn on the constellations, we'll see that Jupiter has been crowning Regulus right here in the constellation Leo the Lion. Well, now I can see an association with the Jewish nation. I can see King in Leo. Well, that's pretty interesting. That's pretty cool. But there's something even bigger that I got to show you that really spooked me when I saw it. And to do that, I'm going to take you back to the Bible, to the last book of the Bible. We've just been in the first book of the Bible. Now we're in the last book of the Bible, Revelation. And I want to talk a little bit about Revelation first and about its author, because I want to make sure you're all on the same page. It was written by a man named John. He wrote 5 books of the New Testament, including the Gospel. He wrote Revelation when he was an old man. And under dire circumstances. The guy was on the island of Patmos, basically locked up for his Christian beliefs. And he was there, most commentators think, for 6 to 9 months, and basically solitary on a rocky island. And he was old at that point, maybe probably in his 80s, maybe almost, could even be 90s. And that's when he wrote the book of Revelation. Now all of you who've read it, you know it speaks in a swirling prophetic imagery, and it's a lot of it seems metaphorical. Sometimes it's not chronological. It's a difficult book. It's a difficult book to interpret. But I can't explain most of it. I can, though, explain a little. I'm going to go to Revelation 12 and show you a corner that I think I understand. Let's take a look and see what John describes. He says, a great and wondrous sign appeared in heaven. What is the sign? Well, I want you to watch this. It's a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon at her feet, a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on his heads. If you understand this, please email me, okay? His tail swept 1/3 of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth so that he might devour her child the moment it was born. She gave birth to a son, a male child, will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. Hey, here's that scepter again. Who's the child? That's Jesus in his role as King of Kings. We saw the prediction in Genesis, and here in Revelation, he appears again, and he's got that scepter because he's now the King of Kings. So, if the child is Jesus, who's the woman? Yeah, that's pretty easy. Okay. And in metaphorical terms, who's the dragon that waited at the foot of the woman to devour the child? That's Herod. The dragon is Herod. John elsewhere tells us in Revelation that the dragon is Satan, but we know in human terms it was Herod. So we now understand what he's describing is the birth of Jesus, but he sees it in the heavens. I'm going to show you something now that definitely got all the little hairs up on the back of my neck and on the back of my arm. And because what follows Jupiter into the sky as we animate the sky is Virgo, the Virgin. And she's clothed in the sun. And she has the moon at her feet. It's just a crescent moon, a very small crescent, barely a visible moon. There's a reason for that. This is Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah. The sheer weight of symbolism in the sky on this day blew me away. In September of 3 BC, when Jupiter is coming in a close conjunction with Regulus, the king planet and the king star, that happening in Leo, the lion representing the nation of Judah, the tribe of Judah, that rises in the sky, and behind it rises Virgo, the Virgin, and she's clothed in the sun, and she has the moon at her feet. It's exactly what John describes in Revelation 12. It's what he saw in his vision. It's obvious. That got me. When I went time forward and saw that rise and realized, oh my goodness, that's what John saw. There it is. That really let all the hairs come up. So I'm looking at all this stuff happening, and everything's just, really moving me. And I'm thinking, man, this may be the birth of Jesus. And then I thought, wait a minute, maybe not. Because Jewish people and a lot of Christian people believe that life begins at conception. So I thought to myself, well, maybe this is the conception of Jesus. Maybe this is the Annunciation, when Gabriel appeared to Mary and she said, be it done unto me. Well, you can test that. I thought, well, let's just wind forward 9 months and see if there's anything interesting happening in the sky. So that's what I did. So let's jump forward 9 months. Now, we're still reading from Babylon because I don't think they've left yet. It's now 2 BC, it's June, it's 9 months later. Jupiter has finished crowning Regulus in Leo and is now moving backwards through the constellations like it always does. I'm going to not the sunset because I need the sky to be darker. You can see it setting in the west, of course, like everything does because of the rotation of the Earth. Incidentally, if you're in Babylon and you're looking west, what are you looking toward? Israel. Okay. Now I'm going to show you something that you can see in any planetarium around the world. Even if they don't believe in Jesus or the Bible or anything, they're going to show you this at Christmas. Because all planetaria do Christmas shows. That's the only way they can get you in there, right? And they always show this event because this event is simply so spectacular. Whether they believe in God or not, they're going to show you this shot. I'm going to kind of cheat as I show it to you, though, because observation back then was all naked eye observation. They had no lenses. So I'm going to cheat. I'm going to zoom in because I want to show you guys. I'm going to take you in on the secret of what's happening here. They couldn't zoom, but we can. So I'm going to zoom in, way in. Until finally, I get those two objects separated. One of them's Jupiter. The other one's another planet. You're going to tell me which one, too. Men are from Mars. Women are from Venus. That's the mother planet. Venus is the mother planet. So we have Jupiter, the king planet, and Venus, the mother planet, coming into very close conjunction. That seems kind of pregnant, doesn't it? In fact, they got even closer than that. Let me wind time forward just a little bit. What I'm trying to show you is that they really stacked like a figure eight. So they didn't block each other's light, they added. What you had then was two stars stacked on top of each other, too close together to separate with the naked eye. And so to an observer, it appeared to be the brightest star anyone alive had ever seen. We know the math, and so I can tell you that no one alive had ever seen a star that bright. That was it. I believe the star of Bethlehem was the brightest star. So we've seen the birth of the king in the sky. We've seen the brightest star. But now we have the issue of it being in the south. Remember when they were traveling from Jerusalem to Bethlehem, the star is said to have been before them, ahead of them. So it would have to be in the southern sky. So let's go back to the sky, see if Jupiter did that. They've now traveled to Jerusalem. It's November. I've given them some time for travel. This is south. Remember, Bethlehem is due south of Jerusalem. And at 7 in the morning, sure enough, there in the sky, in the southern sky, is Jupiter over the little town of Bethlehem. Now the hard part, though. Can a star stop? How can a star stop?
That was a puzzler, because we all know stars can't stop. I mean, physics and inertia prevent that. So I puzzled with that hard. I worried about that one until I realized that I had the problem upside down. I had it backwards. The problem is not that stars can't stop. The problem is that all stars are always stopped. I mean, they move like the hour hand on your watch. You can't see it. You know it's moving, but you can see them move. Well, if the problem is that stars are always stopped, what can Matthew have meant by saying the star stopped? And I thought retrograde motion, because of course stars do stop, planets do, in their movement through the field of fixed stars. They stop, they even reverse course. And that's how I think retrograde motion explains what the star stopping was.
So did Jupiter do that? Let's have a look. I'll animate Jupiter and let it drop a tail. And there you see it, sure enough. Jupiter comes to a full stop and reverses course over the little town of Bethlehem. But I want to show you another screen that's more fun because I can throw dates with it. Now what I'm going to do on this one is I'm going to let Jupiter fly through the field of fixed stars, and it's going to throw off dates so we can tell when these events are happening. The first one there, I know it's small, I'll read it for you. It says 1030 of 2 BC. Now let's fly Jupiter. You see it moving through the fixed stars. That says 1125 of 2 BC, and it's slowing up. It's going to stop right about here, reverse course. The date when it stopped over the little town of Bethlehem, 1225 of 2 BC. Does that date sound familiar? Well, Mr. Larson, you mean they went down there on Christmas? Well, it turns out that's true.